what did everybody think of the book? Those are the people who read it, that is.
I liked it. I'm not a football fan, but you know, I still found it very interesting. I liked all the different elements.
The races.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Well, it's one of the best things. Well, he really has a well-developed world, and you know, he has thought it out pretty meticulously. And the GFL series is the core. Hello. The core of his all his books is so all his other books kind of revolve around a little bit too. So hello.
Well, I felt the same way. I'm not a big, especially professional football fan, but I really enjoyed the book. And it might be somewhat because I listened to it and I grabbed the audio version. And it was a lot of fun to listen to it. And I thought he really captured, you know, the professional football world in terms of what it is now, of course, to the nth degree.
700 years later.
Yeah. We're still having, you know, beer commercials and corruption underneath, you know, and the money is very tempting, alluring.
One of the things I liked about it also is it seems to have pacified the universe a little bit. All these races were at wars, and now, I mean, the Cretorakians conquering everybody kind of helped calm things down, but they maintained the peace through sports.
Right.
Yeah.
Sports as a bonding experience for humans. Apparently, also works for these alien races as well. So that's kind of interesting. So.
Not only bonding, but also the rivalry can play out in that field rather than
their difficulties can be expressed through sports, you know, rather than through killing millions.
Boy, maybe we should try that.
I think we
World Cup soccer Olympics.
Yeah.
I love the Olympics myself.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying, but professional sports like that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that he says in here, it's not just football, it's not just the GFL, but you got all these other sports too, which help you unite the races, sort of. So, but this is the one that brings everybody can participate, all the various races, whereas other ones tend to be predominantly controlled by one race or another. You know, soccer is strictly scornos, you know, so it's hard to get all the races united. But
so I was going to ask Scott whether we modeled this on the Praetorian and the gladiator game in Rome, because that's one way that they pacified the masses was by giving them the games to watch, and you know the fact that there fatalities, expected fatalities in these games. So
well, lethality is so much worse than modern football, obviously. I mean, you have these.
Yeah, I guess it is.
A little bit, yeah.
No, a lot.
A lot. Average, what did they say? Something like an average of every other game, you will lose a player or something like that. That's pretty spectacular. To have and then like leading franchise quarterbacks just to die on the field, like wow, you know. They're paying 10 million credits to that guy and he just died on the field, hit by some defensive end or something. You know? So, anyways,
what did all of you think of the character development that he went through with Quentin?
I thought that was a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the development in terms of him being used to dealing with other races.
Did you think it was realistic?
Yeah, because of the fact that others didn't grow in that way. I don't know the name of the other individual who's
well, like Peter Warburg, was that his name?
Yes.
Who was the other person from his home planet who was quite racist?
Pierce Nation.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name, but he didn't grow in that way.
Yeah.
So I thought that was realistic.
Yeah.
Warburg doesn't ever develop.
He doesn't.
Racist
He doesn't
backwater
change.
kind of, a little bit, but not really. Whereas our main character here, he becomes a fully fledged person to us, the reader. You know, you're empathetic to him by the end of the book, and you actually like him. Whereas at the beginning of the book, and that's a common theme in a lot of Scott's books, I find, are that his characters tend to be unlikable. If you remember Earthcore, his main character is unlikable. He's kind of a selfish jerk.
Yes.
But by the end, you like him. And if you read the sequel by Mouthfits Boy, you really like him. And,
Sort of like Han Solo and.
Yeah, he's kind of a jerk at first, but once you get to know him,
I know, but I always liked Han Solo.
Yeah.
It
But
only worked for me.
Yeah, I could get that, but did you the first time you saw him on screen before you knew anything about him at first, or did he just come across as kind of a arrogant jerk?
He was an arrogant jerk.
He was an arrogant jerk, but not, I don't know, I guess the main character in this book really bugged me, because I felt like he was so selfish or self-centered and
selfish.
Well, you gotta remember, he's a 19-year-old kid.
Right.
19 years old.
Yeah.
And was a slave in a mine without parents. So.
Oh my gosh.
And he came from a racist, backward, primitive human planet. So, purest nation. So.
But he couldn't. I mean, he was offered all this help, and he's like, "No, I'm too good to accept help."
Because on his planet he was too. And that was the number 3.
Yeah.
He just carried the team. He would just go out there and say, "Okay, here's what I'm going to do," and he did it.
He was outclassed. He outclassed everyone on his world.
Right.
But that's how he made it, by just relying on himself. He didn't accept any help, and
So it's
that's
a
the way
major
he was gonna
paradigm
go.
shift for him to have to realize that he needed other people,
Yes,
right?
plus the xenophobia that he had.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which was drilled into.
I like that they developed Donald Pine's character, that he wasn't just, the twist about him throwing games and gambling problems made him more well-rounded.
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed. And of course he wouldn't trust him at all. He just kept thinking he's out to screw me over. And he really was genuinely trying to help you. So, I like that. I'm kind of hoping nothing happens to him later in the GFL.
I thought the writing improved so much from Earthcore, which I wasn't that impressed with.
Right.
But the Rookie, I thought the quality of the writing was very good compared to that.
This was written in 2010. Wasn't it? No, 2012. And I think Earthcore was originally in 2007. So he had 5 years of writing.
Wow.
To develop his skills. So
And how many books? I mean, he pumps out a book or 2 a year.
Yeah.
This is.
those of us who are his junkie fans wish he would do more books in a year. But,
Well, that's expecting a lot.
That's
well, some of his contemporaries do more books than him, but Scott takes his time. He's more meticulous about his books, and it shows in the work. It's just we can't get enough.
Right.
How does
Now-
Ed write 2 books a year? That's what I want.
Some of his contemporaries do, and they're on par with some of them are on par with him. Like Jonathan Mayberry, that's a buddy of Scott. They collaborated books and anthologies and stuff like that together. And every time Jonathan says, "Oh, I'm publishing another book this month," it's all irritated.
In one of the appendices, it gave this really long history of all the stuff that happened in the universe leading up to this.
Yeah.
Is that expounded upon in other books? Like
Yes, and there's a site, which I probably mentioned last time we had our meeting, when we did the Earthcore book. He's got on his website, he has something called Cyclopedia. You can Google it, and it lists all of there are fans out there who have put together all of his books and how everything interrelates, and this little detail in this book ties into this book that came out 10 years later. It's like, oh, well, these little clues and hints and stuff like that. And it's just, he really has the fine details in there. And it's called the Siglerpedia, like Wikipedia, but yeah.
So all his books have the same
New
aliens
same
in it?
characters.
Aliens.
Sometimes the same aliens show up.
Okay.
like the Key. They're one of the races that are talked about, not a lot in the GFL, but they are central to his Infected trilogy, which takes place in contemporary times.
Okay.
So, and then there's he'll make references to them, and you'll say, oh, that's that same race that was in the Infected series that came out all those years ago. So, like I said,
What's his latest book?
the last one that he came out with was Mount Fitzroy, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The follow-up for his
From
first.
Earth his
Really?
first one. And he's working on another one for that one.
He's working on another Earth Core book.
Another one, it's called the Sun Symbol Trilogy, but that's
Absolutely.
I'm hoping it comes out in the next few years. We're seeing here. Oh, there's snacks and stuff over there if anybody wants them, by the way.
Oh,
And
yeah,
water,
water
stuff
in
like
there.
that. Yeah, there's water there too.
So, would you say, how would you characterize his writing from the Rookie to Mount Fitzroy? Has it changed dramatically?
Has it changed dramatically?
In terms of quality or?
Oh, I think so.
Character?
Yes, absolutely. He's definitely improved as a writer. since then,
Dialogue.
so. I'd have to say so.
Have you read any other of the Rookie, the GFL?
I've read a couple. I see. Now here's the thing. I originally read this the Rookie back in 2013, 2012, a couple years after he published it. I read the Rookie, and I heard the audiobook. And back then, he had the audiobook as an adult book. All those terms like shuck,
Yeah.
there's a different word very similar to that.
Oh.
It was an adult series.
Yeah.
Then one of his publishers convinced him to turn it to YA. And then it exploded.
Really?
Oh, this is huge among the YA masses. This whole series. Fell. And now he can't really go back and he cannot publish it as an adult book, because that would screw up his Lexile rating with kids and cost and money. It's never going to go back to an adult book. But you know what? It actually, I thought it held up. Even though he changed the words, there's no foul language or anything like that. He still got lots of violence in there. So I think it holds up as a YA book, and it's entertaining for adults as well, I think. So
Did you enjoy the follow-up books as well?
yes, I'm rereading the starter right now. I read that a couple of years ago, or I listened to it. If you ever listen to Scott's audio, that's the only one he reads of his books. Everything else he gives out to like people like Ray Porter to read for his audio.
Mount Fitzroy. Look at the price of the paper though.
Yeah, $24. He does such a magnificent job on the characters. The voices for all these various aliens. It is phenomenal. I love the audiobook.
Really?
Yeah.
And you're telling that's the starter.
Yeah, the starter or the Rookie, either one of them. You know, he does all the audiobooks for the GFL only.
So,
Okay.
so you said you listened to the audiobook, right?
Well, I listen to this graphic audio where they have different.
That's
people
different
do the
from,
voices,
yeah, that's
And they
okay.
have music and they have the sound effects.
That's
They call it like a movie on.
But the original one read by him is the one I'm talking about.
Okay.
And they have drawings of the creatures?
Yeah, well, once again, you can go to Siglopedia and he'll show you pictures of every one of the creatures on there.
That's what I had a hard time with, is
Yeah.
imagining what they look like.
Well,
and
they're
how-
so vivid, but they're so alien. They're not like
Right.
Star Trek aliens or
Yeah.
something like that, where it's just a human with a bump on their nose. I mean, these things are like, even I have trouble sometimes grasping them and stuff like that. You know, like, but when Scott does the voices, then the character sticks in my head. It's because the description, he just provides an alien, this is alien, describes it. You kind of lose the voices that he associates with, like Hokor. I can hear Hokor's voice whenever I read the book.
Really?
Yeah, because Scott made it so vivid and distinctive, so.
Now, the one thing I wish that he had included was like a glossary of names and race.
Yeah.
And, what position they played. Or.
Well, doesn't it kind of go at the end,
Kinda
some of
does
those
with each
appendices at the
chapter.
end of each chapter where he talks
Yeah.
about the roles of who plays what?
Yeah, well,
what
it says
position?
so-and-so did this,
Mhm.
but you don't know the interior, the linemen. Linemen were all the keys, right?
Mhm.
Except for the defensive ends who were
Right,
high G humans,
heavy G, yeah.
Yeah.
And all the receivers are scoring.
right?
So, I mean, every race has its particular spot, except for like Quith. Well, no, the Quith have too, the Warriors Quith are out there.
They're
Those are the big
linebackers.
ones. Yeah, right.
So,
Those people that were the water-based people that came to Earth, obviously they're not playing. Some of the races aren't playing, only the ones that can be in that environment.
We walk, or what they call the
We
dolphin like races,
Yes.
yeah, obviously they can't. That's weird, I thought some of them could play in some fashion. Just like the dock, the team dock is that big floating alien.
Yeah.
That hovers around, and they also
Magic
call the
carpet.
zebras, I mean, the refugees. The zebes, yeah. He's got me talking like him now, like, so. I mean, I think if you're a fan of football, if you know professional football, you would probably say, geez, this guy knows his stuff. I mean, Scott played football.
Really?
He was a high school football player.
Oh,
His
okay.
dad was the coach of the team.
Mm.
Scott was the shrimpiest, smallest guy on his team. And he played like 3 or 4 years for his dad's team and got the snot beat out of him. But he really devoted, he's like, what's that movie, Rudy?
Rudy, yeah.
Where the guy just gets beat up constantly, but he never gives up. That's, I think, I'm glad Scott's not here. That's kind of Scott, from what I've heard some of his buddies say and stuff like that online and on Scott's video podcast every week. He talks about stuff like that. So
You got to give him a lot of credit for, I don't know football really well. My wife does, but I watch it. But he made it all, he kept it all interesting. And that at the end of the chapters, I was actually reading the stats versus, glancing over them, glossing by them.
and you're not even a football
That's
fan.
hard to do. That's hard to do because, the action, the play-by-play of a regular football game here, I don't necessarily understand it or get excited about it. And so that was really.
It happens very quickly, whereas here you can kind of slow it all down a little bit. And he puts it in nice detail so that you can follow it, There's stuff I thought, every time I think, well, I know football pretty well. Scott educates me in this through his books, and I've learned a lot about football from the book and from the GFL in general, so. And I haven't even read all the books in the GFL, so he's up to 6 books now or something like that now. And he's got a 7th one he's working on. And then he's got a spin-off of, it's called, I forget what it is. It's about a battle cruiser set like 100 years before the GFL was formed during the wars, one of those galactic wars. And it's kind of like the way Scott's described it, it's Battlestar Galactica meets Oz. It's a prison ship full of follow-ups like in the Dirty Dozen kind of thing there. And it's but I've read parts he's given excerpts out for people to read, and is it a good book? I can't wait to get that one. So, but that's part of the thing with Scott. He has so many different books he writes about and different areas of his Siglerverse, as he calls it. That it's kind of hard for me to always keep track of what.
I like the story.
Encyclopedia.
I like the story about the Krikotorians hiding from everybody for several hundred years and staying off the radar so they could develop and get better technology. And I read a lot of other books that have that same theme about, there's people in the universe that are kind of hunting and you got to hide from them. Even in the Hamilton books, the one that I recommended, we had that idea that people are out to get you, you've got to hide from them or keep moving to not be detected. And so I like that idea of how they capitalize on it, that become, these little tiny guys that have these entropic blasters that make them the most powerful.
And they don't care if they die or not. I mean, you do.
Well, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
So, and they're,
They just do alien wave attacks.
Yeah, those entropic rifles, I did never, they are so nasty down there, you know.
That was a great line. The guy says, you know, how did you get that injury? It's like, no, I cut my own leg off to save the rest of my body.
Yeah, saved my life. That was, yeah.
But that was a great way, rather than describing how it worked, like technically and as an aside, putting it into the book that way was great writing that you just learned about it.
I asked Scott about that because like I said, I listened to the audio back in 2012 and he says, yeah, we added some content to it since then too, in one of the later revisions when we printed the book. I said, oh, I didn't remember that scene at all with a veteran. And I thought that was a really well-written chapter too. I thought, man, this just reminds me of, I talked to World War II veterans and stuff like that. In the past, I used to do some interviews and stuff like that. And that felt like genuine, kind of a reluctance to talk about it, but I'm in relatable terms. And I thought, wow, this is really well crafted.
I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't pop up a little later in the book. Maybe it comes in as.
Oh, I'm sorry. About a spoiler. The starter.
Now, did you say the language got cleaned up between?
Well, all those words shuck.
Yeah, no,
shuck.
Yeah, I figured that, but he actually, did he print it or was it just a whole series of stories originally?
I think some of them were short stories that he combined together into the book when he was putting the series together.
Okay.
So he's got a lot of novellas that also go with the 6 main novels so far. So
yeah, I was wondering about
what a machine.
And he goes into some of the other side characters in some of those novellas. So yeah, if you go on Amazon and look up Scott Sigler and type in Scott Sigler, Galactic Football League, you'll see all the books plus the novellas that also go with them and where they were published and stuff like that. So
how many copies of these books has he sold?
Well, you'd have to ask him. I think it's quite a bit.
Said he was the #1.
He was a New York Times bestseller. So
yeah, New York Times bestseller author back for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Oh, so this would make a great movie.
Oh, you could never do this as a movie. All those alien races, you'd have to make it an animated movie, or you'd have to have incredible.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
AI.
Yeah.
Or AI doing it. Well, yeah.
Not AI, but CGI.
CGI,
You could do it in CGI. Look at Waterworld. Avatar.
That's ancient.
Yeah. But how much? Yeah.
For Avatar.
I don't think he's going to get that for James Cameron type money for.
You know, he might. You'd be surprised.
Don't get me excited. Now you're going to get out to say that to the other junkies.
You'd be surprised what might get picked up into a major release.
Oh yeah, especially this one with the football.
Yeah. And the reader base that he's got.
I wish Scott were here to hear that. He'd probably love to hear you guys say that, you know.
What was that game?
Sure,
what was that movie in the 70s or 80s?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Rollerball, or then there was Deathmatch. I mean, there's been a bunch of movies that were based on similar games where you had.
Yeah, but you didn't have all those alien races present.
No,
you know.
you're right.
They were just like post-apocalyptic, dystopian kind of futuristic stuff like that. Oh no, absolutely, you could do stuff like that. I'm sure it's like I said, but like you guys said with the CGI, maybe it is possible. I imagine being incredibly expensive though to do that.
I think it would make so much money to cover it. You know, as long as they kind of stuck to the script. I mean, other than there's plenty of violence and blood. And some character development, no sex that I could really see. Maybe that got wiped out for the.
No.
So they might have put some of that in, but other than that, I think
online games.
It was for a YA market though. You know,
all the different worlds. I really enjoyed hearing about each, you know, the different stadiums, and they're talking about the color of the grass and what it's made out of, and the turf, and
each stadium is a little different too, like that.
Yeah,
too,
and that the fact they still have, you know.
Miller
beer.
I would love to see those worlds. Some of those worlds, the way he describes them, it's like, wow. I mean, he's just really thought these out really well.
Not the irradiated worlds. I would not want to go there.
Well, you probably not in the,
you know,
inside the dome though, you'd be fine.
I don't know.
I thought it was very interesting the way Quentin changed over time as he visited the various worlds.
Yeah.
You know, he started out pretty insular and racist. And after visiting several of the worlds, he radically changed. And it reminded me of a recent quote I read that was attributed to, say, Samuel Clemens or somebody from the late 1800s. And the point of it is that the more traveled you are, the more open you are to other cultures. And we definitely saw this in the Rookie.
Oh,
and
it's a little place as it develops and it learns.
And it just
interacting with different people you're not used to. I mean, that his message involved in all this is you can learn and develop and become.
Yeah, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I've traveled a lot. I've been all over the world for Ford Motor Company. And as I moved from culture to culture and interacted daily with people from every country you can imagine, my viewpoint on all those various cultures and religions and everything else that I came in, and cuisines, they all changed. My wife still doesn't like Indian food, and I love it. Like, okay, honey, if you had to eat it 3 weeks in a row, you probably appreciate it the way I do. But anyway, that's my point.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting was that, you know, he met some of his, you know, own purest people on the other planets, and he says how nice they are and they want to help him, but so, you know, they're nice in their own way, but at the same time, he realizes that he's growing and not like them anymore. So he doesn't need to put them down, just like, hey, there's more out there, and I've seen things you don't know about. I'm more, like you said, open-minded, and these other people are good too. These other races have something to offer.
Yeah, and he'll defend them if somebody attacks his people too. You know, hey, that's the high one, that's my God, and you know, and if somebody attacks his people, you know, well, that's he's kind of embarrassed by them, but at the same time, it's still his home, you know. And you'll see more of that him develop and grow as a character throughout the other books if you decide to continue with the series or something like that. So,
speaking of that, I found that I really didn't care to read any more of the other books that we've read so far. This is one series I would be excited to follow.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, okay. I'm sure Scott would love to hear that. We don't have the starter, but you can get it through Mel. So we can get it for you. Melcat or Adrian. Oh, okay. Yeah.
When you got the comic whatever thing, was that through
Hoopla?
Hoopla.
Yeah, and you can also get the Hoopla, I believe, it also has the ebook and the audio books. So
yeah, that I'd have to look at. I just saw that one came up, and so I rented it or borrowed it, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that version of it. Yeah,
I was kind of
a lot of fun.
I was kind of skeptical when you look at this.
A lot of you were the one that said last time. You said, hey,
look at that
YA book, and I said,
oh man, this is going to be so cliche formatted, and it was to a certain extent, but there was twists that made it interesting.
And if you look at the titles, you can see how it's going to overall the final plot. I mean, the next one's like starter and the MVP and the champion. So you kind of get how it's going to progress. But it's the getting there that is the great part of this book, I think. So
I wonder how he thought up all these aliens.
That's the question I wanted to ask him.
And how, because they interact so that you have all these races that are competitive in a given position. It's not like there's guys out there that are the Incredible Hulk that can lift up a bus. This guy can, bench press 1,200 pounds, which would be, twice what maybe some NFL linemen can do.
Yeah.
And so that they're making
I'm surprised
twice
people don't die in these games, especially humans with some of these other alien races.
Yeah. Well, the armor sounds pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if any of you who read Earth Core remember the cool suits that were in Earth Core, he constantly refers to those. So 700 years later, Angus Cool's cool suits are still out there helping out.
I missed that.
Yeah, these are the types of details you miss if you don't really think about that. So, you'll learn that if you go to that Siglerpedia and stuff like that and look at his stuff. So.
Now, which
So-
race?
So where did we lose Scott?
I don't know, like I said, maybe he got confused on his times, I said 4 o'clock, and I probably should have sent him another email this morning, but my apologies on that, I don't know what happened to him. I don't have his phone number, so I can't really call him and ask either.
He was such an interesting guy just to talk to.
Oh, yeah, the last time he was with us, yeah.
Oh, it was the year before?
Oh, yeah, when we did Earth Core last year,
Oh.
June of last year.
That was before.
Yeah, we recorded it, you can watch it. I sent the link to everybody who wanted to watch him speak about the book, so, yeah, I don't know what to tell you, I'm sorry about that, I thought, well, maybe something came up too, never, he's a busy guy, so. But he said he enjoys doing these type of book discussions, he loves them, I'm sure he would have loved hearing some of the input from you guys, so. Oh, well.
Yeah, so I wonder if he like took his football knowledge and said, okay, what kind of alien would work, the best in this position?
Yeah.
And that's how he developed his aliens.
That would have been a good question. I don't know on that, yeah, I don't know exactly how he came up with all those races like that, so. But.
Because some guys the 6 or 8 legged linemen can have great lateral movement because they have so many legs, but
And speed,
defensive backs,
speed.
they have good speed too,
Yeah.
but not compared to those receivers and defensive
The score.
backs who just
And can jump
Yeah.
20 feet. in there.
and just blast.
Boy, I
down the
wish I
field.
could do that.
But even the main character, he's running a 3.240.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Does anybody break 4?
I don't think so in NFL,
I mean, that would just be.
Give it 700 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I
that's
got
what he
all
said.
the heavy G people that have evolved over all those centuries and stuff like that.
Or they
That
have,
have
like,
almost a sub
mechanical
race,
assistance.
but not in a negative sub, but
That's not allowed. I know, he had to go through all that.
And he talked, and that's another thing, in some of the follow-up books, he talks about how like the heavy G race evolved. And some of these other races. So you want to get more details on how these races, some of the wars that happened. He loves those addendum sections at the end of his chapters where he talks about that stuff. And
Sounds like there's a lot of people out there that are with that whole chapter about the the testing. They had to be not enhanced. So a lot of people are out there surgically enhanced and are doing all this special stuff. But to play in the league, you've got to prove that you have no additional technology built into you.
right, exactly. Well, it looks like Scott is here. Let me see if I can get him to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Sorry about that, you guys. I was caught up in writing and kind of in a ADD hyper-focus spiral and didn't even pull my head up to look attention. Didn't even pull my head out to pay attention. Sorry.
I don't think we got your visual. We got your audio.
Why is it doing that? Let's see. There it is. Start video.
There you go. There.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. Sorry again. Super sorry for the delay.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we've been talking for about a half hour now, and I'm just amazed. The group really likes your books. I was really worried that they wouldn't appreciate the football aspects, but they they really like all the details and all the races, and I'm really thrilled. Hey, some of these guys say you should be making this into a movie.
I wish I could, man. I wish I could, but that's that's a $250-300 million movie.
That's what I said. Like James Cameron type money you'd have to get invested in to make all those races.
Yeah. I think the only way it'll ever happen is some kind of anime or animated type thing, but we don't know anything about that, so we'll see.
Well, with your readership, maybe you should tap into somebody in Japan and ask them if they'd be interested in doing it.
Yeah, they're also, the Japan studios kind of approach things from a different perspective as far as I can tell. There's some very, very popular anime, but you watch some of it, it's a slightly different narrative storytelling style. So I don't know how well it would play with the anime studios. I think they, just like any Hollywood studio in America, they would need to see, oh, okay, we think we're going to get this many people to watch this thing. That, or you just find one of those brilliant people over there who just loves the story. So American pro football, there are leagues in Japan, but I don't know how well it's caught on overall.
Yeah.
Scott, one of the questions we had earlier was this one of your biggest bestsellers?
It's kind of hard to say because I've had it out for so long, and we've, if you count, we podcast it 3 times total over the last 15 years. We've got with all the ebook, audiobook, with all the ebook sales over the years. And then we also, because it's book 1 of a series, so there have been many times we just give the ebook away. So we're not even sure how many copies of it have sold. It'd be right up there with Earthcore, though, is my bestseller so far.
Oh, Earthcore now, and Earthcore was written about 5 years before this.
Well, there's quite a timeline behind this. So Infected was the first thing I ever wrote, and then I put that away, and then I wrote Earthcore. This is way, way back when. And after I wrote Infected, I thought I was a pretty good writer, put that book away, started Earthcore, got through Earthcore, kind of like, oh, I got this figured out, it's gonna be huge. And then I pulled out Infected again to edit it. And it was just terrible because I'd forgotten what I thought it was trying to say, and I saw what was actually on the page. So I was experiencing it like a new reader would mostly. And it was atrocious. It was such an abysmally poorly written book. I was like, okay, I got a lot of work to do here. So
you're a little bit like Clinton Barnes a little bit there. You thought, oh, I'm the badass writer, and then you learned, oh, I got stuff I can learn and improve.
And I wish that was the only time that's happened to me, that I thought I had everything figured out. But turns out I've fallen prey to that many times. So went back and rewrote Earthcore, or Infected, then rewrote Infected, rewrote Earthcore. And I think that's when I started on The Rookie. So The Rookie's I think I started at like 1993 or 94, somewhere in that ballpark. Wow. But the timeline of the setting up of the races and the whole Sigler verse, if you will, that stuff's been going on since the 6th grade. I had an old Royal typewriter my mom got me. I was like, Mom, I told Mom I want to be a writer. She's like, great, I'll get you a typewriter. I'm like, pick, 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 pick. So I still have the original timeline now. It's ghastly to admit this, but I'm going to guess that's over 40 years old, the original typed out form of it. So, so I've been working on it in one way or another for a very long time.
Well, some of the people earlier had mentioned that they thought last year is when we did Earthcore, if you remember, back in June last year, and you came by and we talked. And the same people are here, and they said there was a market improvement, quality to the Rookie.
From Earthcore to The Rookie?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's kind of I kind of have 2 styles of writing, and Earthcore is a bit more techno thriller and a bit denser. Like there's just more stuff going on that all comes together towards the end. And with more stuff, when you're writing with mostly real world technology and real world geopolitical situations, there's a lot of linking that you have to do. And that sometimes happens at the expense of characterization and relationship building with the characters. Because I think that's the stuff that really draws you in. So a more Tom Clancy-ish techno thriller is perhaps a bit lighter on the deeper characterization. And then you get something like The Rookie, where I got to make, except for the football part, I got to make up all of that. So I didn't have to go on, there were no long-winded treatises on technology, and I didn't have to explain how this works. So you know how this works, how this would work in the real world. So The Rookie kind of freed me up to work on it's characters, story, and relationships between characters. And that's what the whole book really comes down to. And then all the fun football stuff is just kind of it's just a backdrop, really. It's a drama backdrop.
Yeah, but you were able to really call upon your own personal experience from high school, right, in football, in writing this. I mean, you can see the passion in your writing in this one, especially, I think. And I didn't know at the time that you had all that background in football yourself, so.
I come from a football family. So my grandfather was a semi-pro football coach in Detroit. My dad is a two-time state championship winning coach in Michigan. My brother is currently a football coach in Michigan. My nephew Tyler was with the Cardinals, Arizona Cardinals, right to the last cut of a preseason 4 years ago. And my nephew plays, I played. So my earliest memories as a human being, the first thing I can remember is sitting on my dad's knee watching 16 millimeter football film. So it's in the blood. It's been around forever. Unfortunately, where my nephew is 6'4", about 225, I'm, when I was in high school, I was about 5'7", 115. So glory on the football pitch was never in my cards. And I didn't really have the focus and the discipline to pursue that, to be a football coach. It just wasn't really my bag. I always just wanted to be a writer. So eventually I concocted this whole thing. And when I was young, I had a real chip on my shoulder that people look down on sports and people look down on athletes and people, not, the little p people. I had this perception that people thought football players were just dumb jocks and all this other stuff. And so the Rookie was an effort to communicate that it's an incredibly complicated sport. And yeah, you can have a singular dimension to your game and do okay in some contexts, but at all high levels of high school and beyond, if you don't really have a good understanding of a lot of complex stuff, you can't play. And especially the pinnacle of that is the quarterback position, with the amount of data they have to process on every snap, let alone all the pregame stuff, all the work, all the playbook, and be able to not only memorize this massive bifurcating algorithm of what can happen. He does this, I do this, he does that, but also be able to do that while people are trying to rip your head off. And so you're operating at this intellectual and base primitive level at the same time. So that's where a lot of the passion in the story comes from, is because I'm half nerd, half jock. So all of my D&D buddies, we all played football. So we were firmly in both camps and pals with everyone. So it was, trying to communicate to my fellow National Honor Society kids and things like that. Like, you guys need to read this, because they may not be as smart as you in certain categories, but they ain't dumb. So try and understand. And that's wound up bringing the joy of football to, thousands of people who've read this book. I get the most common email that we get, the most common contact we get is from people like, I didn't understand football. I thought football was just a Cro-Mag stupid game. And I was never able to communicate with my dad or my brothers about it. I read your book and then I had a rudimentary understanding of the game. And now, when people go see their family at Thanksgiving, they sit and watch a football game, and it's brought them not only the joy and appreciation of the sport, but it's also helped a lot of people get some better family connections. I mean, in my house, we can talk about two things without arguing. We can talk about horror movies and football. Everything else turns into an argument. So it's a lovely safe space for us.
Yeah, we were commenting on that a little bit earlier. One of the things that sticks out to me about the GFL, but especially the Rookie, is how you had all these terrible wars. And I mean, admittedly, the Creterakians, conquered all these people, or at least pacified them, but then they keep them united through a sport, which is a bonding experience. Mm-hmm. And some people said, oh, well, that's not really that way, but I really think it is a strong bonding. It unites people in a way that they're not, takes them away from their differences like politics and stuff like that. Like you said, sports is really a unifying thing, and I can relate to that with my father and my family as well. So
there's two aspects to what you just said. First is the whole Rookie era of the Siglerverse it's a parallel of World War II reconstruction, World War I reconstruction, take little bits of elements of both. So, you take a culture like Japan, who fought in World War II and was defeated and had a lot of just cataclysmic things happen there. Their rebuilding program and their ability to come back and dominate in a different aspect of culture is reminiscent of the key in that story. And all of the major races and governments have a parallel to a post World War I or World War II structure. So that was really fun to be able to use that and realize that some of these concepts and some of the things that we see historical in our culture are going to be a constant wherever you go. You know, if you've got a defeated culture or a triumphant culture that then follows into their own declination, those things would seem to be repeated over and over, at least based on our human humanity and our human history. And then I grew up in a all white town. I mean, there were nothing but white kids where I grew up in northern Michigan. And we had two Vietnamese students come in who were I think they were adopted or there was some exchange program. They came in and they had a tough time of it until they started playing football, and then everything was fine, right? Like that was the glue. And the first minority I ever was face to face with in my entire life was in high school on a football field. And being a huge football fan, a sports fan, started to become kind of a student of that history too. And the first time a huge amount of white people in America and around the world thought of a black man as anything other than just a black man, it was Jackie Robinson. And the first players to break the racial barriers in football, basketball, and baseball. Now you weren't looking at a person for the color of skin, you were looking for the color of their uniform. And I think that the racially unifying power of sport is vastly underrated in the Western culture. And there are still, of course, massive problems with that, particularly in Europe, and black soccer players in Europe go through an enormous amount of bullshit. But so many people, and people I grew up with, people I went to college with, people who were biased and prejudiced because they just never interacted with anybody who wasn't like them. But when you go, I wrestled in college because I couldn't play football. When you go to college and you have people from all these different cultures coming together, it was amazing how much of those prejudices and racial hatreds just kind of went away. They just went away. Because in the general context of the Rookie, if a dude can carry the rock, you really don't give a shit what he thinks politically, what he or she looks like, what their beliefs are. You're like, long as they can get that first down, show up for practice, work hard, be tough, get that first down, everything else fades away, and we all kind of we're all teammates. So that was the other really big part of my effort with the Rookie, was just kind of a cry out to the intelligentsia, if you will, to be like, you guys are dismissing all of this stuff, and it has done more to unify the American culture and bring us closer together than I'd say anything, except maybe the armed forces from 1940 on. So that's where I think, going back to your earlier statement, that's where you see a lot of the passion in this book is trying to use this as a metaphor to show people, well, when you put in the perspective of all these different alien races and you see they can get along, that's a mirror back to we're able to get along very well through sport, through unified fandom, through support of particular clubs, through community involvement in sport, et cetera.
So you could really relate on a personal level to Quentin Barnes as far as your personal growth experience coming from such a limited little town like you were. And
Yep.
Just like Quentin Barnes, you really grew, just like, I mean, we were talking about that earlier. It's amazing that Quentin's growth potential from where he starts as really, and I was saying this earlier, in a lot of your books, your characters kind of start out unlikable, I think. And Quentin is one of those who, by the end, you cheer for the guy. You like him, you want him to succeed. And it continues throughout the remaining books of the GFL series, as I was explaining to the group. So, yeah,
he's, and that I'd say that's a marketing handicap I put on myself for reasons I can't quite figure out, why I started out with main characters that tend to start out unlikable. And if I'm able to hold the reader's attention through those first 2 to 4 chapters, that's when I kind of set the hooks, right? Like, okay, you're like, okay, I don't like this guy. He's a jackass, but let's just see one more chapter. Let's just see what happens. And then eventually when the character comes around to the situation and becomes a better sentient person, you start to come around to the character. So there's like a mini hero's quest, if you will, where if I'm doing my job right, you can see the potential in the character. You can see that the situation the character has come up in to get to this point has not been, cake and happy champagne type things. These people have all come through a lot of difficulty to get where they are, and that difficult time has imprinted upon them and made them coarse and harsh in various ways. And then there's the slow process of once they get a little bit more support, and that's usually support in my books, that support the main character earns, it's never given. They get into a situation where they're earning advancement in whatever the context of the story is. And they're usually side by side with other people who are earning that same advancement as they go. So people kind of bond together and they become more likable. They become more likable as a group. But I only really have that issue with the main character. Most of the secondary characters who are assholes continue to be assholes. And the secondary characters who are just giddy and joyful, like the Tweety brothers, like that's just, they get to stay there. So the reader always has sort of a happy place to go to. You got somebody you really like that'll keep you around until I win you over with the main character.
And I think that's a brilliant way of doing it in each of your books. I think that's one of the reasons you're one of my favorite authors, is because your characters are that way. I like that. They seem more human, more realistic. I grow bored where I read the typical story where somebody starts out and you just know this is the hero and he's going to have a heroic one. Yours are so real. It's hard for me to describe. I love it. So yeah, that's
kind of the goal. A lot of every now and then you have a friendship with someone and you just hit it off right away, and that's great. But a lot of my friend group and everything, there were always tough times, different times or points where you didn't really understand each other all that well. But as you get to know someone and accept their foibles and accept their rough edges, I think that really makes for a deeper bonding experience with another person. And that's gone on through my whole life. Like my wife, she's my second marriage. And we had some tough times in the beginning because we started out as business partners. And, she's Irish from Manhattan, and I'm a small town kid from Northern Michigan. We have completely different ways of communicating and understanding each other. But, once, as we moved forward in life, and then we started dating, and then started dating seriously, we started to work through that. And our relationship is, to me, it's so much stronger and deeper because of the difficulties that we've gone through and figuring each other out. So I try and bring a similar approach with the characters. For my main characters, there's pretty much only one thing that's easy for them. With Quentin, he was the big man on campus when he was playing only other human players. And like every player that makes it to the big D1 football or to the NFL, once they get there at that higher level of competition, they're like, okay, maybe I'm still special, but I'm not the only special one. And those relationships they form when they realize that they are human and they don't have superpowers, those tend to make for really strong relationships. So I'm happy that resonates with you.
I know some people might have a couple of quick questions. Sure. Scott's got to go a little bit. One of the questions I know that came up earlier before you joined us was, how did you come up with some of those races? The various species.
Before I decided I was going to be a writer, writing was neck and neck with biology. So I was set on studying biology and finding a way to make a life doing that. So I've always been extremely fascinated with biology, with evolution, and looking at especially, cladograms and family trees of species and watching the gradual change of things. So with the Siglerverse, in the comfort of my room in the 6th grade, I was drawing out complete evolutionary trees for all of those main races. Like, what were they as a single cell organism? When did they move from water to land, or what are some other ways that species could get to the point where they are sentient? And that's, so sort of evolving them from square one was part of how I got those races. And I also understand better that Hollywood, like Star Trek, you couldn't make convincing alien races way back when. There was no way to do that with a visual program. Only in on the written page could you communicate something that was so non-human and it would still feel real. But as a kid watching Star Trek and every other science fiction, I'm like, this is dumb. They don't all look like us, just, with a funny thing on their face. This is so, to me, in my wisdom of being, 12, I was like, this is all so stupid, man. Why can't they do something smarter? So I set out to try and do something smarter.
Yeah, I think you succeeded.
That winds up with some very unique alien races, which parlay quite well into making you have to have all 5 major races to be competitive in the sport, which brings us back to the racially blind aspect of most capacities of sports. You don't have to like the person you're playing with, but if they're the best person in that position, that's who you want there.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Mark Fry. I have a general question, Scott. Thanks for joining. Your room is soundproof. Is that for a reason? And my second question is, how is, as a writer now with ChatGPT, how does that affect your business and how you do things?
Well, first part of the question, this is the room I do a live stream every Wednesday. You're all welcome to watch. We'll be doing it tonight, reading a chapter of Slay with the current book I'm working on. I also I've been podcasting for 18 years now. And this is the room where I do all of my podcast recording and all of the live streaming. So this is sound dampening. Soundproofing is a whole different ballgame. I can't afford that. So and of course, everything's done in Kraken's colors, which are also my high school colors, because high school sports were such a drastic influence on me as a human being. So I've just always been in love with orange and black. That's why I gave the Krakens those colors. So we do all that stuff in this room right here. And ChatGPT's pretty interesting. I don't know how much it will affect me. I'll start out with the good parts. The good parts are, it's possible, if I take the time and get some help, to train ChatGPT 4, 5, 6 as they go on, to be a better copy editor for me. So I can write a first draft. ChatGPT eventually learns what my writing style is like and what I'm after. It can go through, and I have little things like, I don't use the same word in a sentence twice, no matter what. I try and avoid it, and no matter what. I avoid even synonyms near each other. I try and avoid using the same word within like 3 paragraphs other than the basic articles, because I think those things catch the reader's eye or the reader's ear, and they go, oh, didn't I just hear dramatic? And it takes people out of the story for just a split second. And my job is to keep you in the illusion as deep as I can get you to go. So ChatGPT could help with something like that, which is particular to my style, and learn how I do it. That could be great. Also, I think there's potential as ChatGPT progresses for me to write like a detailed outline and a bunch of chunks of things, and then tell ChatGPT, go through and fill in the holes. Yeah. So, and of course, that's going to be bad, but the amount of time it would take ChatGPT to write a bad first draft compared to the amount of time it takes me to write a slightly better first draft, that may wind up being an economic and time win for me. So we have to see if it gets there. So there's definitely good things that can happen with it. The bad things are, if there's any big publisher, medium publisher in the world who tells you they're not looking into ChatGPT to write books for them right now, they are lying. They're lying. Because there's 2 aspects to it. The first aspect is, if you can get ChatGPT to write basic hero's journey stories, basic hero quest stuff, the same stuff that's in every Marvel movie, every Star Wars movie, all the stuff that we just love, because there's a reason we tell the same stories over and over again. They work with our culture and they work with our biology. If they can train it to do that, and then they can just crank out there's already a guy who's done this. He had ChatGPT write him a 5-book fantasy series in 30 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. Is it any good now? It's probably unreadable, but that's just the start. That's just the start. So what publishers are going to be looking to do and already are looking to do is, why pay an author to do all this stuff when we can just flood Amazon with it? That's the one to watch out for is Amazon. I bet they're working on this stuff right now. So that's going to take away market opportunities for up and coming writers. The market's already flooded. I think we're up to 350,000 books get published in the US every year now. It's brutal. It's a competitive game. And ChatGPT is going to make it even harder. And you may be surprised at some of the caliber of writing that sells hundreds of thousands of copies on Amazon, because the guys and the girls who do it are they're good at marketing. They know how to study the algorithm. They know how to position it next to, say, Stephen King in a certain way and buy ads. And if you get 1 million people to try out your book, a certain percentage of them are going to think you're the best thing since sliced bread. So ChatGPT will be able to do that. The really interesting thing about ChatGPT is take Anne McCaffrey, the Dragon Singer, Dragon Song series. Are you guys familiar with those?
Yes.
Hugely, I love all of them. I read them all in my teenage years. I think she's just the most awesome writer, but she's no longer with us, and her son writes some of the books. But you're going to see the estate of deceased authors selling the entire body of work to a company like Amazon for a big fat check. Then that gives Amazon the rights to all of that writing style in perpetuity. So now ChatGPT isn't starting from scratch. It's like Anne McCaffrey wrote 87 novels. Go through these and understand what her style is, understand how she puts stories together. And then they will be able to put out new books by Anne McCaffrey with the fancy Anne McCaffrey branded logo. And on the bottom, it will say, it'll say an AI version of this book, and no one will care because they get another Anne McCaffrey story. So you're talking about the greatest authors, the most successful, popular authors in history coming back into the marketplace and back on the bookshelves. Wow. And those are going to sell an enormous amount of copies. And that's what's really going to change publishing forever. So it's dark times if you are a graphic artist. It's dark times if you are a young or aspiring writer trying to get in the game, because things are going to get a lot harder. And they're already hard.
Thank you. Thanks. You guys have any questions?
Do you get to interact with other writers like Bujold and some of the other science fiction writers?
I used to interact with a lot of people at conventions. So Dragon Con, Comic Con, BayCon, we would go to all of these things and to promote books and to try and, win over new fans. So, getting to hang out and be friends with like Pierce Brown, Kevin Hearn, V.E. Schwab. It's just so many people. And it's really interesting because we're all hermits. If you're a pro writer, you're in a room like this for, 6 to 8 hours a day, every day. Sometimes you get weekends, sometimes not, just depends on the deadline. And then you get to go to these conferences and interact with fans face to face. But then you get to meet other hermits like you who have slogged their way through the trenches and put in the time and learned how to be good at their craft and learn how to deal with publishers and learn how to make fans and learn how to tell stories for a living. And it's just the best time in the world, because it's this really pre-selected group of people and we're all socially awkward to the hilt. I mean, writers are mostly very socially awkward people, but it's like 10 minutes hanging out with someone like, oh, I've read all your work and I think you're awesome. And 10 minutes later, you guys are like, doing shots of tequila and like, let me tell you about my childhood. And it's phenomenal. So yeah, you get to hang out with them, but you might be surprised. There's very little shop talk that goes on. Like I can go get Lois and Master Build's book and read it and analyze it and see how things are done there and process that. So when I'm hanging out with a person like that, it's like, we just want to hang out. You want to hang out and pretty much not talk about writing. It's the crazy thing.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Shoot.
As a writer, I'm assuming, do you read as well a lot?
Oh.
And what novel have you read recently that really struck you as being worth reading?
I used to read constantly. In school, I would read the textbook and then get bored and have a novel hidden behind the textbook. And my mom, who's a teacher and believes strongly in getting kids to read and teaching them reading is fun, we would go to the library. I would check out 5 books in the bookstore and I would get a book. And that was like every week. It just was like nonstop reading all the time. And then read a lot in college. And then I was in my 20s, I was a student of the game and trying to read a lot of people and see how they do what they do. And then, but as I've gotten older, a couple of things have happened. My ADD has gotten sort of more pronounced without the structure of a 9-to-5 job, sports, school, all of those things that sort of kept me centered. So I have a hard enough time getting my writing done during the day. So now anytime I want to sit and read, there's a voice in the back of my head that's like, you should be writing right now. You should be doing some work. Your story sucks. You should be focusing on that, not out here having fun reading somebody else's work. So that has been difficult. So almost all of my consumption now is audiobooks. I just listen to audiobooks nonstop because it's a great way to get to be entertained by a story. But as far as books that blow me away, it's pretty rare. I can't enjoy reading anymore. And I break everything down. I'll stop and rewind because the way they used a word, because the way they used a sentence, it's just like my dad can't really watch football and enjoy it because he's been a football coach for 60 years and he breaks everything down all the time. And I do the same thing with books. So I've only recently, I'd say in the last 2 or 3 years, thanks to my wife saying it's no fun to watch TV with you because you're just miserable about everything all the time. You correct everyone on everything in every show we ever watch, and it sucks. I don't want to watch TV with you anymore. I was like, okay, I got to work on this. And then since then, I've been able to learn to just relax and just watch a show for being a show and not something I would have ever made. So I've gotten a lot of the joy of entertainment back. Shows like The Good Place, Schitt's Creek. We watched all of that. We're watching Better Call Saul right now. Breaking Bad, Battlestar Galactica, The Mandalorian, surprisingly, it's had a massive influence on my career since I watched it, on my writing style. So if you guys, what's that?
The Marvel shows you watched,
and the Marvel movies too, like getting to watch the Marvel movies, talk with all my nerd friends from high school. We're all comic book geeks too. And getting to watch the simplicity and streamlined nature with which Marvel and Star Wars tell stories. And it's much less unencumbered by detail and trying to show off, I know all of this stuff. They're just telling stories that people have been telling for thousands of years and doing it in a fun and interesting way. So most of my enjoyment and most things that blow me away now are TV and movies because I've accepted like that. I'm never going to be a director. I've written many screenplays. That time of my life has passed. That's not going to happen. So now I'm able to step back and just kind of watch and enjoy the story like anybody else would just enjoy a story. So I think the most recent book that my benchmark for a book that blows me away now is when I have this reaction, like, fuck, I wish I'd thought of that. That's awesome. Like if I do that, I'm like, okay. So the Temeraire series by Naomi Novik is one of my favorites. And I know that's getting up there in years now, but it's phenomenal. Helldivers by Nicholas Ansbury Smith, because just the basic constrained concept of the story out of the gate in book 1 is so smart. And if you like Battlestar Galactica, you will love that series. Red Rising. So there's definitely books that pop up, right? But mostly what I do now is the other authors I meet at cons, I try and read at least one of their books. I get asked to blurb books a lot. So now if somebody asks me to blurb a book and it's from one of the big 5 publishers or someone I know, and they can send me the audiobook, I spend the time to do that. Because again, I just can't sit down and read the books anymore. so those are pretty much the biggest thing. I have a lot of trouble sitting down to read or listen to a book because it's the it book. It's the book of the moment, or this young author is amazing. She's going to blow up the world, that kind of a thing. I'm just like, I got a backlog. So I really don't get to those. I just read one called Horse, which absolutely blew me out of the water because Horse novel by Geraldine Brooks. And it's something, not only would I have never written, I would have never read it if somebody else's opinion of mine was like, I think you should read this book. You might really dig it. So that's one that blew me away. It's just amazing, telling several different stories and bring them all together at the end. And now I realize, even though I'm a horror writer, I realized like, I guess a week ago, that I've never actually read any H.P. Lovecraft. So now I've got the complete works on audio and I'm listening to all of those. And there's definitely some just awesome stuff in there. It's from another time, and some of the social stuff in there is a little disturbing, but just like, he's like Tolkien in the regard that this style of storytelling and this genre kind of didn't exist before that person. I think so he's a big one, Tolkien, and then Frank Herbert with Dune.
Yeah.
Every space opera you've ever read or heard of wouldn't exist without Dune. So like those are the kind of books that blow me away. The ones that are sort of first in their format.
Yeah. Scott, I have to plug, since you brought that up, this is one of the books we're doing next month, The Cruel Stars by John Birmingham, which Scott read, and he said, I mean, he quoted this, he said, it's the closest book, he said, to his own style of writing. And I think Scott made that comment. I said, wow, that's pretty flattering to John Birmingham. So,
yeah, and fortunately, I really enjoyed the book, because if I'd said, this is like my writing and it sucks, that would have been bad. Yeah, I thought I read book 1 and book 2 of that series, and I haven't quite got around to book 3 yet, but super duper fun. Just foul-mouthed characters that you're not sure whether you like them or not, but you're pretty sure you're going to wind up liking them. And they're not good people. They're just not good people at all. And then where he takes that story winds up being really fun.
All right, well, that's our next, that'll be our book for next month. So
great.
Glad you said that. So were there anybody else any final questions for Scott? I know he's got to get going for his podcast coming up, but if you have any final questions, let us know.
Yeah, Scott, do you do anything to amuse yourself within your books? Like, I assume, I could be wrong, but that you call Quentin Barnes and he's a quarterback. So the initials. Do you do anything else to make your books fun for you?
Little word plays like that. I do a lot of 80s and 90s pop culture references. So one of my favorite things to do is to take lines from my favorite movies or movies I liked and work them into the dialogue of the actual story. So that if you've never seen this movie, it won't seem weird at all. It just seems, it naturally flows in the dialogue. And if you have seen it and aren't crazy about it, you might miss it. But if you are, like, there's tons of, for example, Quentin Tarantino is a huge one. So there are Pulp Fiction lines in almost everything that I write, to the point where I've sort of run out of them. So that becomes a fun game for me. Anytime I can have movies where I think the dialogue is super sharp and I went back and rewatched stuff, I'll work those lines into it. So that's sort of that's the internal game that I play, that I have a lot of fun with. Because there's a lot of 80s and 90s kids who catch that stuff. Like, my parents aren't going to catch any of these lines whatsoever, unless I'm writing like a Three Stooges line, then my dad will catch that, But that's a very fun game, because I'll get emails like, did you know that's the same line that John Travolta says in the bathroom scene? I'm like, yeah, I know. I did that on purpose. So that's a fun thing, a fun way to connect with readers.
I was gonna say, John Travolta, not Samuel L. Jackson quotes.
There's tons of Samuel Jackson, tons of Harrison Ford, just tons of that stuff is all woven through all the books.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thanks for sticking around. Appreciate that a lot. And I'm really glad you guys enjoyed the book. I hope you move on to read the starter. The story definitely starts to change. Quentin continues to grow up a little more with each book. And by book 6, I won't spoil it, he's a completely different guy. And then books 7, 8, 9 are in the works too. Wow. And it will definitely end. It was supposed to end at 6, but it's going to end at 9 for sure. And if you do stick with the series, if you do stick with it, I can guarantee you the end of book 9 is something that you can't even comprehend right now. And you've never seen anything like it. I've been working towards this. I've known the ending of this series, I think, since I've been like 14 or 15.
Oh, wow.
Before I even started to write it. So it's going to be over the top.
We need to actually see those books.
Working on it.
Be nice, David.
It's a common junkie complaint. So.
I got no defense, man. I got no defense.
All right. Well, thanks again, Scott, for joining us for this. And I'll look forward to seeing you later tonight in Sigler Place.
See you guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
See you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, I'm glad he was able to finally join us.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was amazing, actually. That's the first time I've gotten to talk to an author like that. That's very, very.
I'm working on actually trying to get John Birmingham to join us for this next one.
Oh, cool.
I don't know about him yet, so I'm not going to say anything yet. So
Where does he live?
Australia.
Oh,
That's the
wow.
time difference.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. Time difference would be the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
something.
7 a.m. there, so, or like,
16 hours.
You know, I don't want to get the guy up at 5 a.m. to come join us or something.
Yeah.
He might want to.
But I will start passing these out.
What day is our next meeting?
The second Wednesday of August. I mean, October. So.
Okay, now here we go.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, like I said, Scott really knows this stuff, and he's always interesting to listen to. I encourage you, if you like listening to Scott, he and his wife do this podcast every Wednesday night, 9 o'clock.
On what?
Sigler in Place, YouTube, Facebook, whatever. So Sigler in Place, just Google it, and it will take you to the link.
What do they talk about?
He talks about his books. He talks about pop culture. He talks about his writing styles and stuff. Same stuff we just did.
Yeah.
He's fascinating to listen to. I've listened to him ever since the pandemic started.
Really?
He started his video podcast, right around the time of when the lockdown started. So, and they've been doing it for 3 yeres. So he's starting to cut back a little bit, but you know, it's fun to listen to him. He and his wife. His wife is very charming. So yeah, awesome couple. So
I've got to run. Thanks for bringing me my copy, Doug.
That's right. I will give you your copy. I'll be here at Woods if you want to.
No, I'm gonna take it back.
Oh, you're gonna take it
to the House.
Oh. Okay, there you go. All right.
Sorry you couldn't make it.
Thanks, everyone.
Hopefully your family gets sober real quickly and me smoothly with COVID. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Look forward to seeing everyone next time.
all right. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for arranging.
Yeah.
For Scott to.
I was a blast for me. I'm thrilled every time Scott.
I could tell you didn't like him at all.
There's a reason why